Good morning. It's October 22nd. I'm Ezra Levant, and this is my live election post-mortem super chat, where you can give me your thoughts in our comments section. If you feel moved to support us, you can chip in a few quid. Google gives us 70%, which is a small way for us to earn money because we're not on the government dole. I was up very late last night with many of you. In fact, we had over 120,000 people watch our election night live stream. Cian Bexley was in our world headquarters with me here in Toronto. Sheila Gunn-Reid was at the Conservative Party election night to-do in Regina, and our friend David Menzies was in the Beauce, Quebec, at the People's Party headquarters, where Maxime Bernier did not win his seat last night. I have in front of me a cup of coffee and a Red Bull. And if I pour the Red Bull into the coffee, don't make fun of me. I'm just trying to do the best I can. What I want to do today is brainstorm with you what happens next, because anyone who says last night's election was a success is probably not accurate. Was it a success for Justin Trudeau? Well, he lost his majority. He lost a lot of seats. He lost everything in the West, basically. But he's still the Prime Minister. He absolutely is the Prime Minister, and perhaps, given that he has a more tenuous grip on power, perhaps he'll be like his father was, when his father got sort of a surprise reprieve in 1980 and brought in all his most radical legislation, including the National Energy Program. So not only might Trudeau be more reckless because he says, what the heck, I've got to do it now because I might not have more time, he will probably be pushed further to the radical left by the NDP or others with whom he may make some coalition of convenience. The NDP, for all their strutting, were cut in half. It's incredible to me that Thomas Mulcair, who got, what did he get, 44 seats, was quickly defenestrated by his own party, but Jagmeet Singh was treated like a conquering hero for being halved. What did they wind up with, 25 seats? People's Party, as I mentioned, lost their one seat and underperformed nationally. I think people on the right of center either stayed home or, if they showed up to the polls, made the strategic vote and said, we got to vote for the Conservatives because they're not doing that well. Of course, the big winner on the night is the Bloc Québécois, which shot back to prominence, scooping up a lot of seats, some of them at the expense of the Conservatives. It's funny how, for all of Andrew Scheer's efforts to woo Central Canada, between Ontario and Quebec, he basically broke even. Not enough, not good enough. But, of course, who would replace Andrew Scheer? The leadership race last time was not particularly a high-powered affair. If Maxime Bernier is out, and the caucus wouldn't have him given his splitism, who would run again? I mean, Andrew Scheer purged many of his leadership rivals, from Brad Trost to Kelly Leach. Maxime Bernier's out. I mean, really, who would even run? The only name of any likelihood would be Jason Kenney, who would immediately have the support of caucus, who would immediately have name recognition across the country. He probably has higher name recognition than Andrew Scheer does. Speaks good English and French, and has the strength with ethnic communities in Ontario and BC, the two battlegrounds that count. But I want to talk more about Alberta and the feeling in Alberta and the separatism in Alberta. I think that more thoughtful pollsters, especially the ones not based in the Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal triangle, I think they are polling today Alberta separatism and various forms of it. For example, should Alberta become an independent country? Should Alberta seek to join the United States? These are real questions, and I saw a tweet last night from an old law school colleague. I think he was a couple years ahead of me. Ken Wilson. I haven't been in touch with him in nearly 20 years. And yeah, I should try and find it. It was just very, very, in fact, I'm going to try and find it. It was not emotional. It was not full of rage. It was not even full of resignation. It was just, okay, here's what we got to do now. And let me see if I can find it, because I want to read it to you. I don't want to just paraphrase it. Looks like I won't be able to find it very quickly. But he basically said, let's have a referendum on separatism that is legal, that follows the path laid out by the Supreme Court of Canada, and let's move on. And they were, I'm sorry I can't find it right now. I'm a little bit groggy. Let me have some more Red Bull. Give me a second. But what was that tone? And this is a I mean, I haven't talked to him in a while. He's one of the most straight-laced guys I've ever met in my life. I'd call him boring, not as an insult, but as an observation. He's just, there's nothing wild-eyed about this guy. And in fact, I saw that last night from a lot of Calgary professionals. Like, I'm not talking about political rabble-rousers, certainly not by populist nationalist types. I'm just talking about lawyers, engineers, severely normal folks in Calgary. They're not pouty, they're not raging, they're just saying, okay, message received. There's no love here anymore. Let's get a divorce. And it's that resignation. I mean, Quebec and Canada, when Quebec says, we're out of here, they really huff and puff, and they want that dance. They want a Quebecer in Quebec City to say, we're out of here, unless you give us more, we're out of here. And then a Quebecer in Ottawa says, oh, don't go, we'll give you more. And it's this whole choreographed play fight, which ends the way we always know it will end, which is more goodies for Quebec, more transfer payments, more equalization payments, 3 guaranteed seats on the Supreme Court. Oh, and now the 6 non-Quebec seats on the Supreme Court must be perfectly bilingual. Countless deferences to Quebec. It's a game. It's a theater. It's a pantomime. They don't actually want to go. They want the rest of us to think they want to go, so we'll assuage them in some way. It's a different kind of separatism in Alberta. It's, okay, message received. What was the one common theme amongst the Liberals, the NDP, the Bloc, and the Greens? Alberta bad. Oil bad. Although not quite, because take Quebec, for example. The Bloc Québécois last night said, the first thing he said, in fact, was, there will be no oil pipelines in Quebec. But that's obviously not true, because Quebec, being the second largest province and having the 3rd busiest airport in the country, maybe it's the 4th busiest, they love oil. They love jet fuel. They love their cars. They love heating their homes. They have the ports. There's nothing more carboniferous or carbon intensive than the bunker fuel used in ships. Never let Quebec say we don't like oil. They import their oil, that's all. They import their oil by rail from the United States. Do you remember the Lac Mégantic railway oil crash? A oil train was parked uphill from the town of Lac Mégantic, and it came crashing down when the brakes failed, blew up. It was a horrific disaster, just spectacular and terrible. That was an oil train from the United States. I'm not blaming the United States. I'm not blaming, that's what it was like. I'm not blaming anyone. I don't know if there was blame there. I don't really know how the legal inquiry went. My point is, They get their oil, they just get it by train, or they get it by tanker ship from Saudi Arabia. There's also an amazing pipeline. I don't know if you can Google it fast enough. It's called the Portland-Montreal pipeline. And it was built after the Second World War, maybe during the Second World War. And it's just what it sounds like. OPEC tankers would dock in Portland, Maine, disgorge their oil there, and it would just be pumped by pipe right up into Montreal. Now, I'm not sure on the current status of this pipeline. It may have been rendered obsolete by the Line 9 pipeline reversal. I don't want to get too deep into pipelines. But Montreal, there you go. It's sort of a low-res graphic, but that, take my word for it, that's Portland, Maine. And that's a pipeline that takes oil to Montreal. Sorry for the low-res graphic, but like for 70 years or something, maybe 50 years. It's funny, when I wrote my book, Ethical Oil, I was testifying before Parliament's Natural Resources Committee, and the Liberal Natural Resources critic of the day, Denis Coderre, who went on to become Montreal's mayor, I gave him a signed copy of the book, and he said, I was saying, Quebec gets the most conflict oil of all the provinces in Canada. Quebec gets the most conflict oil from OPEC, the Sharia oil, the dictatorship oil, the terrorist oil. And he said, no, he said, we get our oil from Maine, he said. Yeah, that's a, thank you. So he actually thought that there was all these, you know, oil fields in Maine, and he was getting like Ben and Jerry's Vermont ethical, you know, organic oil or something. No, you idiot. That's just where the Saudi tankers would drop off. It was easier for the Saudi tankers to drop it off at that Portland port, put it on a pipe, and pipe it the rest of the way, than to navigate the St. Lawrence Seaway. But Denis Coderre said, no, no, no. Our oil is from Maine. No, you dummy. That oil was OPEC conflict oil. It takes that kind of self-delusion in Quebec to pretend that they don't drive cars or fly jets or heat their homes with oil. They don't hate oil. They hate Alberta. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong. I saw some super chats. Let me go back and see if I think I saw one from Proud Boys Calgary. Sorry, I missed it. Maybe Justin later on you can send me the super chats. So my friend, I'm gonna see if I can find his tweet again, because there was a whole bunch of them, and I can see that Wexit, as they're calling it, the Western exit, is really getting a lot of momentum online. And I say again, it's different than the fake play fighting of the Quebec separatists, because I think most Quebec separatists know that economically they're dependent on Canada in so many ways. They're a net recipient of equalization and transfer payments. Alberta is not. Alberta is a net giver. But let me make a case for argument's sake, and I'm just working this out with you here. I'll talk about it at greater length tonight on my show at 8 p.m. I would encourage you to watch that if you like. As my friend, sorry, it's Keith Wilson. I can't believe, that's why I couldn't find it. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit tired, and I haven't seen Keith in a long time. There we go. I'm sorry, I called him Ken. I'm a little bit tired. Here he goes. Here we go. Can you go to Keith Wilson? It's IK Wilson on Twitter. IK Wilson on Twitter. And put up his tweet from 7 hours ago. It's just, he's a very smart lawyer. And I've never met anyone so calm. That's my point I'm trying to make here today. This is not a hot rage. This is the cold determination. And yeah, this is the one. Thanks for finding. I'm sorry I called him Ken. Please forgive me for that. He says, look at this. This is a smart lawyer. And he was worked with the farmers advocate. He property rights. So this guy is a rules-oriented guy. Like he loves the law. He loves following precedent. Let's hold a proper, fair, and lawful vote on separation. And he's a lawyer, so each of those words has meaning. Proper, that's not just some wild hollering. Fair, as in a fair question, and lawful vote on separation. If Alberta votes to separate, the Supreme Court of Canada has laid out the process to implement the divorce. This is a lawyer talking. Alberta will be much better off without the burdens Ottawa imposes, and we won't have to send our wealth to Ottawa. Sorry, but it's time to go. And he is sorry. But that's not rage, is it? That's not passion. That's not hot-blooded. That's, all right, message received. Message received. Every party in Ottawa, every party in Parliament except the Conservatives, is anti-oil and anti-Alberta. Can we get some of those Trudeau clips? I don't know if you have them handy. Quebec is better. Do you have any of those ones from Trudeau? Alberta, when Alberta ran the country, they were running it wrong, all those snipey, snippy things. See, there's none of that in the West. You don't have an Alberta chauvinism like you have a Quebec chauvinism. And part of that comes from, I think, an inferiority complex. And you can understand it. You're the last redoubt of French in North America. Like if you're an island of, 7 million French speakers in 400 million North America, you're going to have a paranoia, you're going to have an inferiority complex, you're going to worry that your culture is going to seep away, your history, your language, your customs. I get it. But I think that gives birth to a coping mechanism, a chauvinism, a sneering. I don't see that in the West. I don't see people saying, Alberta, woo, in your face, Quebec. I've never really seen that. There's irritation at forced bilingualism, forced equalization, but that's not a snobbery or a condescension. I've never seen an outright hostility to Quebec itself. I don't know any Albertan who begrudges Quebecers their French in Quebec. They just think, well, why do we have to have our airport signage in English and French in Calgary? And I actually don't even think that's a Quebec demand. That was like a Trudeau-Mulroney sop to Quebec. We'll demean Anglophones across Canada because that'll make you feel better. I don't even think that was even a natural Quebec demand. But let me show you what I mean. I've never seen the counterpoint to this from the West. Here's a clip. Take a look.
Quebecers are better than the rest of Canada because, we're Quebecers.
Yeah, I've never seen anyone in Alberta say that. I've never heard anyone in Alberta. I don't know any Albertan who thinks that. Albertans might think the way the province's affairs are ordered is better. The free market spirit, entrepreneurship, work ethic. So I think Albertans like Alberta and are proud of it, but it's not, we're better than you. I've never heard that. Have you? Tell me an Alberta politician for sure. Tell me an Alberta politician for sure who's ever said that. Proud Boys Calgary, have to agree, Ezra, Alberta, strong and free. Yeah, but that's not a sneering. That's not sneering. Of course Albertans love Alberta. And you might hear the phrase Alberta first. But that's not a disparagement towards Quebec or non-Albertans. That's my point. Play that clip one more time.
Quebecers are better than the rest of Canada because, we're Quebecers.
Yeah, I'm 47 years old. I've spent probably half my life in Alberta, maybe more. I've been in Toronto for about a decade now. I've literally never in my life ever heard an Albertan say something like that. It's just not there. Can you dig up the one where he talks about how Albertans, he's got another one. It's in the same vein where he talks about Albertans, the socio-economic something, like he talks, I think it was on Tout le monde en parle. So maybe Google Trudeau, TLMEP, Alberta, Quebec or something. Like it was, he said it in French, so it was translated into English. He talked about how, he used the phrase socio-economic or something, on how the prime ministers he admired are all Quebecers, and the problem he had with Canada was that Albertans were ruining the socio-economic bonds. I don't know if you can find that one. I don't know if Brian's in. We've used that clip, not recently, but it's in the same vein. Anyways, yeah, if one side hates you, and you could respond with hate yourself, and that's a hot, passionate fight, right? I don't see that hot, passionate fight anymore. I wouldn't even call it resignation. That Keith Wilson tweet I read to you, I'm not going to call that resignation. I'm going to call that a lawyer using his noggin and thinking, okay, I got a plan now. Here's the plan. And by the way, the plan was authored by Quebecers. It was the perennial, never-ending, perpetual separatist play fight, the pantomime, the dance of the seven veils, the endlessness that gave us the roadmap on how a province can separate. Separatism from Canada is not like in the United States, where I think it's illegal. I'm not an expert enough. I'm going to have coffee. I'm going to switch between the Red Bull and the coffee. I'm not an expert enough in American Civil War history. Is separating illegal? Well, Abraham Lincoln obviously thought it was, and the South obviously thought it wasn't. And they separated first through legal means and then through military means. We don't have any of that drama in Canada because it was litigated by nothing less than our Supreme Court. There is a roadmap on how any province can separate. And it's not through insurrection or the FLQ crisis, the terrorism, the Front de Libération de Québec of 1970, October crisis. You don't need to do that in Canada. You take a very Canadian way. You go to court with lawyers. Actually, you don't even need to do that because the courts and lawyers, that part's already happened. Now you just have to follow their roadmap. As Keith Wilson say, have a proper, fair, and lawful referendum. And Bob's your uncle. Here's that other clip of Trudeau. Take a look.
Regardez, le Canada fait dur maintenant parce que c'est des Albertains qui contrôlent notre agenda communautaire et socio-démocratique. Ça marche pas.
Est-ce que le Canada est mieux servi quand il y a plus de Québécois au pouvoir que quand il y a plus d'Albertains au pouvoir?
Ben, je suis libéral, alors c'est sûr que je pense que oui. Certainement, quand on regarde les grands premiers ministres du 20e siècle, les seuls qui ont vraiment tenu le coup, c'était des députés du Québec. C'était Trudeau, c'était Mulroney, c'était Chrétien, c'était Paul Martin. Alors, on a un rôle, ce pays, le Canada, est à nous.
Hey guys, did you know that Canada belongs to Quebec? Did you know that? Play that clip one more time, Justin, please. Oh, we got to reload it. I watched that again, and this is not long ago. I think he was an MP by now. That first clip was obviously when he was younger, the one where he said Quebecers are obviously better. Here he expands on it. You can tell it's not old because he references Paul Martin, who was Prime Minister until 2006. So this would have been when he was perhaps an MP, at the very least in his 30s, beginning his political life. It's a political conversation. Take a look again.
Canada fait dur maintenant parce que c'est des Albertains qui contrôlent notre agenda communautaire et socio-démocratique. Ça marche pas.
Est-ce que le Canada est mieux servi quand il y a plus de Québécois au pouvoir que quand il y a plus d'Albertains au pouvoir?
Ben, je suis libéral, alors c'est sûr que je pense que oui. Certainement, quand on regarde les grands premiers ministres du 20e siècle, les seuls qui ont vraiment tenu le coup, c'était des députés du Québec. C'était Trudeau, c'était Mulroney, c'était Chrétien, c'était Paul Martin. Alors, on a un rôle, ce pays, le Canada, est à nous.
Justin, can you send that to Brian or Martin? I want to get a uploadable Twitter native Dropbox clip of that, because everyone in Canada should see that. I want to make that my pinned tweet. Thank you, Justin. Let me read a super chat from Mara8785. I agree with Jussie Trudeau about Quebecers are better because they've managed to milk us Albertans and hold the country hostage unless we fund their socialist pipe dreams. Hey, you said pipe there. What's a super chat, just for those who don't know? I'm looking at the camera, but out of the corner of my eye, if I see your comment is in highlighted color, I'll do my best to see it and respond to it. And I thank you for the financial support. I see A. Tudasso said Conservatives got the popular vote. Yes, and so did Hillary Clinton in 2016. But that ain't the rules. And it's sad, actually. If you look at the there's some ridings where the Conservatives in Alberta got 80%. Some of them were higher than 80% of the vote. You only get the seat once. It's like Hillary Clinton in California. You can only get those electoral college votes one time. Whether you win them with 99% of the vote or 51% of the vote, you can only win them once. And to say, well, Andrew Scheer got more of the popular vote, yeah. In Red Deer, he got 70%. In Crowfoot, he got 85%. Mazel tov. That and 35 cents will buy a phone booth phone call. That's a 20th century reference for my younger viewers. MK Ultra says, I hope Red Bull is paying for that product placement, Ezra. Yeah, Red Bull, they want to be associated with fat, middle-aged guys who are groggy and talk conservative politics. That is a hot demographic. Basil, the Pumpin' Seagull, says, Max can still win. Match me, no refunds. Can still win what, my friend? He lost fairly resolutely. Analog IDC, great coverage last night, thanks. Well, thank you for saying so. We had 120,000 people watching. That's not bad, is it? A heartfelt thank you to Max voters for effing us. I don't even know what you mean. In fact, I would have responded to that by saying, although the People's Party vote, wavered up and down a bit on election night, I think it was about 1%. I'd have to call up the stats. And I think maybe only in one single riding, Richmond Hill, did it make the difference. If all the People's Party votes had gone to the Conservative, then the Conservatives would have beat Joe Howery, who was a pro-Ayatollah Liberal MP. But I'm sorry, you just can't hang that around the neck of the People's Party. I mean, how would you know they would vote all for the Conservative? And maybe if the People's Party, if Andrew Scheer could have kept Maxime Bernier within the tent, maybe the party would have been stronger and more appealing. I don't know. I'm sorry, you can't. I just don't accept that. The one silver lining on the night, of course, was Jody Wilson-Raybould winning in Vancouver Granville. And I hope she gets a prestigious position, perhaps the chair of the Ethics Committee in Parliament or even Speaker of the House of Commons, Wouldn't that be something? Yeah, I mean, I now have in front of me a map of the results, and for example, there were ridings in Alberta where the Conservative margin of victory, so not even the total vote, but the margin of victory, for example, in Red Deer Lacombe, 52,000 votes, margin of victory of just under 50,000. Red Deer Mountain View, margin of victory, 49,275. It's just Battle River Crowfoot, margin of victory, 49,000. Who cares? It's like having some fantasy football league or something. It's a great entertainment, and it's like playing Dungeons and Dragons. There is no alternative universe. In the universe in which we operate, in the election rules we follow, Conservatives lost. I think Andrew Scheer's going to hold on because, first of all, what else is he going to do? He's had no career other than politics, and being an assistant broker for like 6 months don't count. I think that he should have won last night. SNC Lavalin, blackface, scandals in every country around the world, from the Chinese hostages to the costume party trip to India to the disastrous renegotiation of NAFTA. If you can't beat Justin Trudeau in that situation, you had no horsepower. He had no appeal. He's as charismatic as a wet blanket. But who's going to replace him? You can't beat someone with no one. If the Conservatives couldn't choose a stronger leader a couple of years ago, who would they choose today? Other than, I say again, Jason Kenney. I think the Mulrooney daughter, what's her name, Caroline, she may have some ambitions, or rather her father may have some ambitions for her. There may be some Ontario also-rans, perhaps no French, but I don't see any first-rank challengers to Scheer. Basil said, Ezra, it's a joke that started with Bernie Sanders and his supporters donating to his campaign, but he gave it all to Hillary Clinton. Personally, I think Canada's over now. There is no recovering from this. I don't know. FA, Canada doesn't have electoral college. Correct. How did Trudeau win if Scheer got the popular vote? We do have an electoral college. We don't call it that. We call it 338 seats in Parliament. So each one of those seats is like an electoral college. And by that I mean you can win an individual district by one vote or by a 50,000 vote margin. You still only get the one seat. I'm just using a different term, electoral college, 338 seats in Parliament. That's how we choose our government in Canada, who has the most seats, not who took the most votes to get those seats. This is fairly basic. An obvious point is the Green Party. They got 3 seats, but nationwide they got 1.1 million votes, which is astoundingly inefficient. Let me put it this way. The Greens, I'm just looking at the math here out of the corner of my eye. Do you want to put up the CBC Canada Votes results page? Because I want to show people the stat I'm referring to. And I am desperately out of caffeine here right now. Just go to the CBC main page and then click on that political button at the top there. Yes, thank you. That's exactly the one. So take a look, my friends. Look at the Green Party. They got 3 seats, right? They got that one in Fredericton and 2 on Vancouver Island. 1.16 million votes. So divide that by 3, that's almost 400,000 votes per seat. Now, obviously, that's spread out because most of them lost. But look a couple notches higher at the Bloc Québécois. 1.37 million votes. So not very much more, right? And they got 32 seats. Are you with me here? So the Greens got 1.16 million. They got 3 seats. The Bloc Québécois got 1.37 million, and they got 32 seats. Or do another comparison. The New Democrats, look at that, 2.8 million votes. That's fairly serious. And they got 24 seats. So compare the Bloc and the NDP. The NDP got more than double, in fact, almost exactly double, but slightly more than double the number of votes the Bloc got. You see that? But they got fewer seats. The Bloc got 32 seats, the NDP got 24 seats. Now, I'm not calling for proportional representation, but I can see why the little parties do. I mean, the Greens, if they had proportional representation, would have 6.5% of the entire parliamentary seats, and my very, very rough math tells us that would be 20. The New Democrats, by my very rough math, would have 50, right? The Conservatives would have about the same, slightly more. The Liberals would have fewer, but that is a desperate loser's attempt at finding consolation in rules that just are not. That's why it's the losing parties that want to change the rules, because they can't win under the rules. Donald Trump says it best, is he won under the rules that were. He says if it were the popular vote, he would have campaigned in a different way, and obviously he would. I don't think Donald Trump campaigned in California at all. He had one campaign stop there. But if it was a popular vote game, he probably would have gone to LA a bunch of times. But he didn't do that, because that's like a fantasy. It's a fantasy, so come back down to reality. That's my response to FA asking about the Electoral College. Basil says, and Canadian Conservatives are too stupid to know why Trump won and why Max was going to lose so badly. So I will now mock all those Max people who were sure he was going to get a majority. I didn't hear anyone think he was going to get a majority. Basil says, again, there will not be Alberta separation. All we will have is a system exactly like the UK within a decade. Ezra, thanks for putting up a fight. All right, well, let me come back to my main point today, which is Alberta. You know, can we get some lawn sign B-roll chit-chat, if we have that? So I was out in Alberta a fair bit this campaign. I really enjoy getting out there. I'm originally an Albertan, and proportionately, that's our strongest support base. We have numerically, the largest number of our supporters are here in Toronto, just because it's such a big city. 5 million people in the greater Toronto area, 2.5 million in the city itself. But pound for pound, we're strongest in Calgary, with Edmonton being a close second. And I was out there with my Libranos book, and I was having some fun handing out these Libranos lawn signs. Oh, perfect! Thanks for the Red Bull. Can I get you to? Since you're here, can you give me one shot of the flavored coffee? Thank you, Brian, for coming in and giving me some coffee. Do we have volume on this, or are people hearing?
Exactly what I put in. This guy's days are numbered.
All right. In that commercial break, my friend Brian brought me another Red Bull, and I made a very special request for another coffee. I want to tell you, I don't normally do that, but he came in to offer, and that was very nice. I'm just a little tuckered, that's all. We had a long night last night. So anyways, I was out there in Calgary handing out some of those Libranos lawn signs, which were pretty fun. And I obviously wanted to talk about Trudeau, and I wanted to talk about my book and the lawn signs, and I wanted to talk about the rebel. I wanted to talk about stuff that was important to me. But at every stop I was, people spontaneously brought up with me Western separatism. And I say again, these were not wild-eyed people. They were not edgy people. They were not professional political chatterboxes. They were just severely normal folks who had it. And they wanted to know what I thought. They wanted to know, how do you do it? I think that was a slow-burning fire that just had a bunch of kerosene dropped on it. That's my thought. Seducing with Food says, if the West separates, is Canada a G7 country anymore? JT may only be allowed to show up at G20 meetings now. Hey, that's a great question. I don't even know if mathematically we're a G7 country right now as it is. I don't know. I'd have to check the stats on that. It may be some legacy holdover we have because of some earlier privilege, like being part of the D-Day invasion. I just don't know without checking. So back to Alberta. Can I throw something at you? Like, can you put my pinned tweet up there for a second? Brian, thanks for the coffee. It's very nice of you to bring it in, and I don't think I would have hollered for coffee, but since you came in with the Red Bull anyways, I'm going to say cheers and thanks for the coffee. I just need to get going, that's all. Oh, a pin with super chat. Can you scroll down? It's my response to Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump sent a congratulatory note to Trudeau late last night. And he said, congratulations, yada, yada. Of course he did, because that's the diplomatic thing to do. And so Trump said, congratulations to Justin Trudeau on a wonderful and hard-fought victory. Canada is well served. I look forward to working with you toward the betterment of both of our countries. I love you. Hey, can you dig up, keep this on the screen for now, but can you dig up the Trump clip of him saying, I was shocked how many times there was blackface. That was a really funny one. Anyhow, while you're looking for that clip, of course Donald Trump likes Justin Trudeau because he steals Trudeau's lunch money every day. He wouldn't want a leader that would stand up for Canada. Was there anything we got in the NAFTA renegotiation? I mean, anything? Have we got Donald Trump's help to get our hostages back from China yet? Is there anything Canada has got from the United States under Donald Trump? Take a look at this gorgeous, gorgeous clip. Remember this?
Mr. President, your reaction to Justin Trudeau, can he survive this controversy?
Well, I was hoping I wouldn't be asked that question. It had to be you that asked it. You had to ask me that question, right, Justin? I'm surprised, and I was more surprised when I saw the number of times. And, you know, I've always had a good relationship with Justin. I just don't know what to tell you. I was surprised by it, actually.
He's just a master of, he can be audacious, but he can be sort of sneaky and oblique too. Some super chats. Bill Ballantyne, keep up the fight, Ezra. Thanks, I'll try. Keaton Lair, under proportional representation, there would be 5 PPC, 22 Greens, 26 Blocks, 54 NDP, 112 Liberals, 117 Conservatives. Lovely work from Prince Albert. Well, I put it to you that result would be probably even more terrifying. But if that were the system, you know I mean it when I say we would run a rebel party. And you know we would get at least 5% of the vote. You know it, of course we would. I think we might even get closer to 10. That would be fun. Bob Nielsen, Ezra, you said a while ago that we in the UK were screwed now that you Canadians have re-elected Trudeau. Welcome to our world. Well, you're very funny, and I can't deny it. Anyhow, can you put back up my that tweet there, Justin, please? Yeah. So I said, hey, Mr. President, Greenland turned you down. I bet Alberta wouldn't. I bet Alberta wouldn't. And see, that's the thing. Let me tell my friends around the world who may not be as familiar with Alberta as I am. It's a pretty big province now. It's about 4.5 million citizens, so it's not huge. But let's see. I mean, the average U.S. state, they got about 330 million people, 50 states. So the average U.S. state has around 7 million people in it. So Alberta would be a little bit smaller than average, but larger than average geographically. Okay. Most obviously, Alberta has the 3rd largest reserves of oil in the world. There's just under 200 billion barrels of oil sands oil there. And I know this from my studies when I wrote my book called Ethical Oil. There's another, you're not even going to believe this, but I'm going to tell you because it's the truth. You can look it up. There's another 2 trillion, with a T, barrels of oil in place. What is the difference between a proven reserve and oil that's in place, a resource? The difference is we can see those 2 trillion barrels. We know they're there, but they are uneconomic with today's technology and today's oil prices. So if those two things change, we could have 2 trillion barrels of oil. What do I mean by those two things? Until about 15 years ago, the oil sands themselves were impractical. They were experimental. So even the 200 billion barrels of oil that we now know are producing, scientists, economists, securities regulators would say, yeah, you can't actually say that there's 200 billion barrels of oil there because it's so wacky, this oil sand. The idea you would steam the oil off the sand, that's too experimental. In fact, it wasn't until something like 2004, I think, that the SEC, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, would even let companies say they had oil sands reserves on their books. They said, you can't say that. That's like saying you have pixie dust on your asset list. That's not real. That's a trick. You might dupe investors. It wasn't until, I think, 2004, if memory serves, that the SEC even said, all right, you proved the technology. We're not going to call it experimental anymore. My point is, we may be 5, 10, 20 years, I don't know, maybe never. But I think it's a lot more likely that we develop a technology to give access to another 100 billion or another 200 billion barrels of oil using new technology, because we know it's there. It's just not economic at current prices and technology. So this is my long-winded way of saying there is so much oil there. There's more oil in Alberta than anywhere else in the world except for Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. And if those uneconomic resources of 2 trillion barrels become economic, then you really have more oil in Alberta than anywhere else in the world combined. And what's the similarity between Saudi Arabia and Venezuela? Well, they're both dictatorships. And here's another stat for you, and I know this from my book, Ethical Oil. Alberta has more than half of the world's accessible oil reserves. And you can guess what that means. That means you can't just buy a plot of land in Venezuela or Saudi Arabia or Nigeria or Iraq or Iran or the UAE or Qatar or any of these little dictatorships. You can't just buy a plot of land and start drilling. You got to pay bribes. You got to bend the knee to the dictatorship. You just can't go into Saudi Arabia, buy some land and start drilling. It's not how it works. You can in Alberta. You follow the rules, you get your permits. Literally half of all the freely accessible oil in the world is in Alberta. You don't think the United States wants a piece of that? Alberta could come in as a territory, like Puerto Rico or Guam or Samoa or the U.S. Virgin Islands. So it's not a state. It doesn't have Senate seats, but it has most of the rights and privileges of citizenship. I'm just brainstorming here. Free travel. And let me look at it now from the Liberal point of view. Justin Trudeau would be thrilled. How many seats are there in Alberta? Is it 34? Is it 34 seats? I think it's 34. Let me just be super sure on that. I think it's 34. Yeah, 34 seats. So there's, of those 34 seats in Alberta right now, 33 are Conservative and 1 is NDP. So it's a purely Conservative province. And like I said, it's got all these supermajorities that mean nothing. You don't think Justin Trudeau would like to be rid of that? If you took 33 seats away from Parliament, 34 seats, that were all Conservative, Justin Trudeau would win every election for the rest of time. It would be like if Texas seceded from the Union. What Democrat wouldn't want that? because they would win every single election for the rest of the time, because those Texas electoral college votes are absolutely essential for any Republican to win. You take 34 seats out of Confederation and all of them are conservative seats, how could the Conservatives possibly ever win again? Yeah, what's not to like if you're a liberal? And let's say you're a stupid liberal, and there are many of those, and you want to get your carbon footprint down. You just said goodbye to the biggest carbon emitter that you hated the whole time. What's Alberta's emissions? I don't even care about this. It's such a stupid thing. I'm sorry, I used to know this off the top of my head. I really couldn't care less what the actual number is. I can't even find it. Alberta GHG. I'm just Googling it right now. It's hard to find because everyone's sort of hiding it. Give me one more second. I think Alberta's greenhouse gas emissions, again, it's not a real thing, are 250 megatons, which is about a third of Canada's. So if Alberta left Canada, Canada would immediately meet its Paris global warming targets. Now, of course, that's so meaningless because Alberta would still be producing the oil. It's like when you shut down a factory in Canada or America, but it pops up in China. You didn't stop any smokestacks from happening. In fact, you just pushed the jobs overseas. But so again, I'm looking at this from a liberal point of view. You get rid of 34 seats in Alberta, 33 of which are conservative. What's not to like? You get rid of all those irritating, freedom-loving, hardworking Albertans. You instantly get rid of 250, or whatever the number is, megatons of carbon dioxide. Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, it would be like if for some reason the island of Montreal were to separate with all those liberal seats. That's the Liberal Party base. What conservative wouldn't say, oh, shucks, the city of Montreal, you want to leave. Oh, break my heart. Okay, go and take your 20 guaranteed Liberal seats with you. Just from a raw political point of view. Now, would America take 200 billion barrels of oil, hard-working, conservative leaning? Of course they would. Would they take it as a full state? Probably only in concert with the accession to the union of a Democrat place like Puerto Rico. Like I say again, though, they could both remain as independent territories. Sorry, not independent, non-state territories. Now, I'm not necessarily proposing any of this. I'm just working it through. I'm brainstorming it. But Keith Wilson makes a point. It's not illegal to separate in Canada. In fact, it's legal. There's a legal process. For pretty much 50 years in Canada, it's been a legitimate political ambition of Quebec. In fact, not just legitimate, it's been the favored political ambition of Quebec. No Bloc leader, no Parti Québécois leader is ever scrutinized by the media party in the manner that a non-separatist party is. If Trudeau, Elizabeth May, Jagmeet Singh, and the Bloc guy whose name I can't even bother to remember, all hate Alberta and its oil, and if Alberta is out of love also, and if there's a legal way to leave, and if it wins approval in a referendum, where's the problem? We know that all the other parties hate Alberta. They say so. Maybe they don't say, I hate Alberta, but they say, I hate Alberta workers, I hate Alberta oil, I hate Alberta pipelines, I hate Alberta's ambitions, I hate Alberta's constitutional rights for I hate all those things. I hate politicians from Alberta. I hate those rednecks from Alberta. I hate those bigots. I hate those sexists. I hate those homophobes. I hate those Islamophobes. I hate those xenophobes. That's another way of saying I hate you. So if the Liberals, the Greens, and the Democrats and the Bloc hate Alberta, and Alberta doesn't return the hate. I mean, they hate Trudeau, but that's just a personal thing. Again, I don't think Albertans say, I hate Quebec, I hate Ontario. I think they hate being wrung out like that. So it's a cool rage. It's not a hot rage. They're just, okay, see ya. Why don't you put that Keith Wilson tweet back up? Just because I think he said it. I almost remember it from memory. He said, let's have a fair, proper, and legal referendum. The Supreme Court has laid out the proper path. Let's be done with it. Keith Wilson is his name. Keith Wilson. Super chat from Margaret Fraser. Ezra, would RNN consider verifying Buffalo Chronicle reports of impropriety? Yeah, the Buffalo Chronicle. I'm gonna say they're just a gossip site. I would not put stock in what they write. Okay, let's look at Keith's tweet one more time. Let's hold a proper, fair, and lawful vote on separation. If Alberta votes to separate, the Supreme Court has laid out the process to implement the divorce. Alberta will be much better off without the burdens Ottawa imposes, and we won't have to send our wealth to Ottawa. Sorry, but it's time to go. I love that. Sorry, but it's time to go. You don't even ever hear Quebec separatists saying sorry, but it's time to go. They don't. They don't say that. They say, to hell with you. It's time to go. We hate you. It's time to go. We're better than you. So they don't say sorry. You don't even hear that. Yeah, sorry, but it's time to go. I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm out here in Ontario. We got a lot of super chat. Okay, I'll look for my emails for the super chat. I mean, I'm here in Ontario. I've been here for pretty much a decade, probably. I live in Ontario. And look, I know there's a lot of good people out here. I like my friends and neighbors. I like my fellow rebels who work here at the office. They're not bad people. There's a lot of good people. By the way, just because the Conservatives didn't win, picked up almost no seats in Ontario doesn't mean they got no votes here. Let me just look at Ontario really quickly. The Conservatives picked up 3 seats. And in terms of popular vote, look, a third of Ontarians voted Conservative, 33%. You want to talk about disproportion? The Liberals got 41% in Ontario. The Conservatives got 33%. But that gave the Liberals more than double the number of seats, 79 to 36. And again, I'm not here to make the case for proportional representation, but the NDP got 17% in Ontario. They only got 6 seats. So they got half the votes the Conservatives did, but 1/6 the seats. So look, a third of Ontarians voted Conservative. And not all the ones who voted Liberal hate the West. But like I say, it's a cool divorce. It's a cold divorce. It's not. I mean, I was thinking last night, who could tap Andrew Scheer on the shoulder and say, buddy, you didn't do it. You didn't do it under ideal conditions. You're never going to do it. Well, the only one who could do that is Jason Kenney, and maybe he will. But Jason Kenney is the leader of Alberta, and he will not abide separatism because he's too much of an establishment man. And I believe, obviously, he harbors national ambitions. So he cannot countenance or consent to any discussion of separatism because he knows that would be cyanide to any federal leadership ambitions, which he surely holds. A fella doesn't develop thousands of contacts around the country, beat himself up to learn French so well, and spend 250 nights a year on the road just to be Premier of Alberta. That was a short-term harbor for him while someone else took out Trudeau. Well, that someone else didn't do it. Jason Kenney has three ways forward. One is to be the Premier of Alberta. But that can't be, and try and be as normal and follow his planned course, but I don't think that's possible given this result. So he either has to support the Alberta Rights, Alberta First approach, which would include a referendum, but I don't think he's going to do that because of his national ambitions. Or he could become the Alberta Premier who sort of tamps that down and takes Ottawa's side against Alberta. That won't go well. Or he does what he was probably hoping to defer for another 4 years and run federally. Now, I could see him taking any of those three approaches. Let me read some super chats and then I'm going to wrap things up. I've been giving it for an hour here. Tom Corty, $5. Andrew Scheer is to blame for this. He's continuously worked to eradicate conservatism from his political landscape. Bernier, Cooper, Kinsella. Ilya P. Ezra, honestly talk of why people vote Libs for life and hate Conservatives. Please critically why Conservatives are a no-no in municipalities. Well, because the culture. Politics is downstream from the culture. You can't have left-wing media, left-wing showbiz, left-wing pop celebrities, left-wing schools, left-wing universities, left-wing everything, and then expect on one day every 4 years people are going to magically be conservative. It doesn't work that way. Observer Dude, will Rebel be in the UK at the end of the month reporting on Brexit? That's not a bad idea. MVP, Alberta plus America is a marriage made in heaven. Stephen YouTuber, with non-whites voting 80 to 85% Liberal and Trudeau opening the floodgates, will we never see a Conservative Party again? I don't know the stats on non-white immigrants voting one way or the other. I note that the Conservatives won with Sikh candidates and Chinese candidates. They won in various parts. Tim Uppal beat Amarjeet Sohi, for example. In the Richmond area, I don't have the names off the top of my head. So I know, for example, the Somali community, which is voted in a clique for Ahmed Hassan, just like they do for his friend Ilhan Omar in Minnesota. So there is definitely some truth to what you're saying there. I don't know enough of the statistics to know if it's true. Dr. Fye, a lot of Southern Ontario outside Toronto voted Conservative. Well, again, that's the thing. Is it an Ontario problem or is it a Toronto problem? I don't know the answer to that. I know that Toronto is as liberal as Alberta is conservative. If there was a move, and occasionally you see this, Toronto wants to be an independent city-state like Singapore. Tough to argue against. They would say, wow, we make all the money at our banks and our head offices. Why should we subsidize the yokels in rural parts? All right. I mean, again, as a conservative, how happy would I be to take 20 or 30 perpetually liberal seats out of the parliamentary mix? One of the defining characteristics of our time is that people are going to smaller identity units, not larger. It's an anti-globalism. Look at the nationalist parties throughout Europe. You look at Brexit. Look at Trump's retreat from the UN global warming baloney. Look at the Czechs and the Slovaks breaking apart. Look at the former Soviet Union. Obviously, that's been a 30-year trend. Why should Toronto be in the same system as Newfoundland, be in the same system as Red Deer? There are many commonalities we have, but increasingly it's a rancorous union. Let me conclude by saying I'm just talking these things out. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to come down in the end. I do find Keith Wilson's tweet compelling. Why not test the question? And test it lawfully, properly, and fairly. Don't test it like the Quebecers did with their FLQ crisis. That's violent. Don't test it with threats and don't test it with vague questions. Don't test it with endless redoings and undoings like Brexit. Test it properly. And if Alberta's to go, let it go. Or if it's to stay, let it stay. And maybe there's a salutary effect to testing it, which is the rest of the country will say, oh, maybe we don't want you to go. Or maybe the rest of the country will say, be gone. Like I say, there's two good reasons for the Liberals want Alberta to go. Perpetually win the rest of Parliament and lower their carbon emissions. There's one last super chat I'll take a quick look at. Webley Pug, talk is cheap, but who has the courage and charisma to lead us away and can withstand the slander of the media party? Trudeau's brown shirts, Antifa, and a corrupt judiciary. Isn't that the truth? I pity the fool who stands up and says, I'm going to lead Alberta out of the country. They will have a scrutiny of them, their families, their friends, anyone who's ever said hello to them, anything they've ever written on social media, anything they've ever said or done. They will have a scrutiny the likes of which has never been seen in this country before. They will be defamed and slandered for free by the rented media party and for pay by the dirty tricksters of this country. You're so right. And a lot of it will work. Remember, Alberta's newspapers are all owned in Toronto. The Calgary Herald, the Calgary Sun, the Edmonton Journal, the Edmonton Sun. Its TV stations are all owned out of Toronto, the CBC, CTV, and Global. Its radio stations, Chorus, are all owned out of Toronto. Do you really think for a second that they would allow Alberta to leave? Because they know that Alberta is money. Justin Trudeau cares about votes and carbon, but I think real people would say, no, don't let Alberta leave, that's where the money is. I don't know. It's day one of the rest of our lives. I know that Alberta separatism is a thing. I knew it was before. Angus Reid said so in his polls. I'll make a prediction right now, that in the next poll, more than 50% of Albertans would say they would consider it, not that they are separatist, but they would consider it, they would talk about it, and maybe they would even like a vote. That's my prediction right now. The first honest poll of Albertans will show that more Albertans are open to separatism now than were ever open to Quebec separatism. And on that note, my friends, having been chatting with you for some 66 minutes, I got to get on with my day. Got a lot of stuff to do, including preparing for tonight's show at 8 p.m. If you want to become a premium subscriber of The Rebel, that's how you see my nightly show. You go to premium.rebelnews.com, premium.rebelnews.com. It's $8 a month, which is, what, half the cost of a Frappuccino these days. And you get my long-form show, which is a monologue, and we interview a guest. And Sheila Gunn Reid has a show, and David Menzies. And of course, you help us survive. We don't get any money from the bailout media. All right, my friends, until tonight, on behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters and those around the world, bye-bye, and keep fighting for freedom.